My conversation today is with Travis Lawrence, an artist and Freemason. Travis's creative medium is woodcutting. Woodcut is the oldest form of printmaking and involves preparing, stenciling, and cutting or carving wood to create intricate artistic designs. By this method, Travis has created an absolutely stunning rendition of the major arcana of the tarot, combining his personal artistic style and a noble honoring of the traditional correspondences and key imagery of the cards. I sat down with Travis to talk about his art, inspiration, experience in Freemasonry and Freemasonic symbolism, and much more. I'm Ike Baker, and this is the Arcanum Podcast. So the first thing that I want to say is that I really, really love your artwork. I really love what you've done with the major arcana of your tarot deck.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your esoteric background, or just your artistic background in general?
I mean, art background, that's like one of those hard things to answer. I mean, I've been doing art in some form pretty much like since I was a kid. I didn't get into printmaking until I accidentally took a class in when I switched back over to be an art major. I took a intro to printmaking class and really had no idea what I was getting into. And yeah, I just kind of just fell in love with it. And, you know, that was probably 2006 or something like that, maybe. Yeah, even like in and out of school, like I just stuck with it, and you know, here I am, 2023, you know, still at the same medium. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's wonderful how those things just fall into place sometimes. It's not planned, but that it just ends up working out.
Right. Yeah. I was going to be a photo major. I went to the art department, signed back up for studio art, and I had an intro to photo class and an intro to printmaking class. And I remember I even asked the admissions lady. I was like, "Well, what's printmaking?" And she's just like, "You make prints." And I was like, "All right." Like, this is like, went with it. And yeah, it wasn't until I got in there and it's just like, oh shit, like this is amazing. Like this like takes drawing to like a whole new level. So.
Yeah, that's kind of how I ended up feeling about the occult and magic and stuff. I got into it almost completely by accident. So just sort of fell in. And I mean, yeah, I was even very, very, very reticent to do this. I won't get into the details about how or why this whole thing happened, but never on my radar, never a plan to do any of this stuff. And I kind of feel like I'm the best part about all this stuff is that I get to meet people like you that I probably would not have met, you know, otherwise.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap, I think, between both that community and the art community. Not so much like overlap as in how they work together, but just like the similarities, you know, because they're both definitely working with you know, like energies outside of just the normal day to day. So like just the way that it connects and opens up doors. You know, I've seen it in both realms, to where, I mean, I guess you could say that with anything really, but it does seem to be like you're opening yourself up to like just the possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I want to get into that. We'll get into that a little later. Because I've done some visual art. I'm not great. I'm not terrible. It's really a very cathartic zen for me, much more so than even music, which is what I did somewhat professionally for many years. Visual art to me is really where, oh my God, that's an amazing mug.
At the last,
Is that a bear?
what's brewing? Yeah.
That's amazing. But what I wanted to talk about first actually was was the tarot venture for you a little bit more of an aesthetic thing, or do you use it for certain things? I know that some people use it. A lot of the common conception is that it's a divination tool, which it is, but it can be used for a lot more than that. Are you coming at it from an esoteric interest as well?
Well, so like the type of work that I've been doing for several years, you know, has been block printing, and it pulls from a lot of just that look, that image, especially, you know, older alchemical manuscripts and similar type visuals of that era. And just constantly for years, people, they would be like, "Oh, are these tarot cards?" And I'm like, no, they're not tarot cards. And then the follow up would be like, "Oh, you should do a tarot deck." And I was always like, no. And it wasn't that I was against it. You know, I had a Marseille deck, and the first tarot book that I read was Jodorowsky's Way of the Tarot. And you know,
let me tell you that's exactly how I started. Marseille deck and Jodorowsky's Way of the Tarot.
Yeah, and just like, I mean, you know, he's totally like every single like speck of those cards is symbolic. There's something in it that's symbolic, and like I related to that in that sense because I work in that type of realm approach. But I always was like, no, I'm not going to do a tarot deck. Not going to do a tarot deck, and you know, a lot of it was because I wasn't a tarot reader, and I if I were to do something like that, I wanted to make sure that like I was like truly doing a service to the tarot. It's like the history, and I wanted to make sure like I knew like the ins and outs of the cards. There's plenty of decks out there that just kind of like it's the Wolf Tarot or something like that. You know, I didn't want to make something like that. I wanted to honor that tradition, and yeah, it just kind of hit a point to where it finally like, you know, it's like, you should do a tarot deck. You should do a tarot deck, and like, teasing the ideas, hanging out with a friend that was a reader and had done some decks. And I had a dream, and in that dream was me designing the Magician. And it was like me just like processing, like, okay, I'm going to put this here, I'm going to put this here, I'm going to make the face like this. And I woke up and like, you know, I wrote it all down, and I was kind of like, okay, like, I guess I'm making a tarot deck. And the deck that I've done, it's just the majors. So it's just the first 22. And for me, the approach was mostly coming at it from the Fool's Journey type perspective, that it's a narrative that's happening from, you know, 1 through essentially 20, or the world. And the Fool was, you know, the main character, I guess you would say, that is going along this path. So that was my approach, rather than making it as like a you know, like a divination tool. A big influence was the Meditations on the Tarot. That was like the book that was kind of like the backbone. One, because it did use the Marseille visuals, but also like, I mean, once I started reading that thing, because I had a stack of tarot books that I was using and referencing, but that was like the one that was like, okay, like this is the backbone, and all those other ones I can like reference and use as like, okay, like I can approach this card from this angle, or I can have this happening in it. But I think it's just how rich that book is, and just how like impactful it had while reading it. That just became like the primary tool, the primary reference point. And yeah, so it's the it's the 22 the 22 of the majors. And,
Right. Yeah, I took a look. I took a look at some of them, and there is something kind of vaguely reminiscent of the Marseille deck, except it's much more expressive. And I immediately, that was the first thing that popped into my head, was because for me they're instruments. And I think I know exactly who it was that you might have been hanging out with, by the way. your tarot card friend. But for me, they're instruments of, they can be used for scrying, meditation, invocations, things like that. And they do change you. They change your psyche. And I find that really, really interesting that you said that you had a dream about designing the magician, and that says something pretty interesting right there on a kind of a subconscious level about the self, and about even just the initial transformation that takes place just encountering the cards. And the way that is really activated is because, like you say, it's highly, highly symbolic, and it's based on an idea of the archetypal, right? When they were constructed, we didn't have that word for it, but it's that idea still existed. And the first thing that I noticed was that you were respectful of that, and that was of the minute symbolism. They were not altered to the point to just suit whatever creative license, but you kind of did your own thing through that mold. And I would use them. So there's not a lot of tarot cards that I would use, to be honest with you. I mean, they're doing all sorts of wacky shit out there with them right now, but I would definitely use your deck.
Cool. I'll have to get you a deck.
And I'll send you one that I made, but I did with colored pencils. So
Cool. Now it was fun. So that would have been like early 2020 when that happened. And I spent several months in the beginning of 2020 just reading, taking notes, and then I'd sketch out each one. And then it took me, I guess it took me the first half of 2020 before I actually like got them onto actual blocks and started carving them. And a lot of it was just, I wanted to focus on each card, but I also wanted to like have kind of like an overview of all of them before I started really going in and like making them, because not only is it like, making each one and giving each one its due respect, but also how they relate and interact with the other ones. So like there's references in certain ones where, especially if you lay them out the way you can lay them out, and I like laying them out to where like in sections of 3 rows. And then you can get, I mean, I think Jodorowsky does this too. And that probably was a big, to where if you had them certain lined up, there's also like, not only is there a narrative between 1 and 21, but then there's also like a narrative, going like vertically as well. So I wanted that. So I had like all these sketches, like on little like sheets of paper, notebook paper, just laying them out on the floor. And then just like adding to all of them one at a time, but then also like collectively. And then I think it was I guess it would have been August of 2020, because I quit my job then. which was, not the smartest thing to do in the middle of this like new pandemic that was happening. But I was doing some tech support for a university, and it was horrible, especially like in that setting, because we were also supporting a hospital, and it was just driving me like I was miserable, and I had all this other stuff that I wanted to do, and it didn't serve me. So I was like, all right, like I'm out, I'm the total fool, like stepping off the cliff. And it was great. But yeah, like once I got rid of that day job, I was just carving like nonstop for like 8-10 hours a day, like just knocking them out. And then doing the prints. And then most of like 2021 was just figuring out how to get them printed and like made onto an actual production deck, which that was kind of a headache. But and then I had them released at the end of 2021. So it was like a 2-year process doing it.
Yeah, that's great. It's great that you were able to take your time and focus, right? I think a lot of times we get wrapped into these projects and we don't really have the time for them. It's like, boy, I bit off more than I can chew. So that seems like a little blessing. And you have to, right? You have to play the fool. You have to take that chance. And the really profound stuff is completely, it flies in the face of I guess common sense, but that's where the magic happens, man. I'm interested to go back to what we were talking about concerning art, especially I love the fact that you referenced dream with the tarot, and it kind of coming to life in that zone, in that particular part of your psyche. It wasn't a daydream. It wasn't something that you were actively doing. It was, which is exactly what the tarot is supposed to do, right? It acts on the subconscious, and then through the subconscious to the unconscious, and then from the unconscious is our door to the collective unconscious. So it's really cool that you had that little story about it. But I'm curious if you find visual art or just art in general to kind of share that doorway with, do you think that intuition or dream have any kind of I guess a shared causeway through the psyche in the same way that, say, like, art and inspiration do?
Oh yeah, totally. This is my animals. Every time I get on a Zoom call, they know to be on my lap the whole time. Like they left today, and now it's like other attention coming. So here they are.
Yeah, my dog's laying at my feet right now. So.
Definitely, yeah. To answer your question, one of the big influences on me in my early 20s was Carl Jung. So like being introduced to him at early adulthood, where I'm like really just trying to understand the world, the reality, and him like providing those words that I was not mature enough yet to really like formalize myself, introducing me to the collective unconscious and archetypes. So dreams, or at least just that other realm, totally. And even currently now in like the actual art making process, majority of the visuals that I come up with, they're not really like long thought out ideas. They're usually like visuals that just kind of come. And oftentimes it's something where I have to like write it down or sketch it out quick, or I'm going to forget it the same way you would with a dream. And so it's definitely coming from like that similar place. And even if it's not necessarily like dream state, I have been, ironically, like, especially this year, really focused on dreams. I had a pretty intense dream on January 1st, and it was kind of like inspiration to really kind of step into that mind state. Like even now I've got like mugwort tea. So like
yes,
I mixed it with like, I guess, peach and ginger and then mugwort and kind of mix together. And sometimes I'll put like peppermint in it or something. But yeah, I've been drinking that every night. And like, what is this? This is March, beginning of March. And I'd say probably the last 2 months, I've maybe only not gotten at least a snippet, some portion of a dream, maybe like 5 times. So like that's been, and which is kind of rare. Like before it used to be like once a week maybe or something like that. But just kind of like stepping into that, like, okay, gonna remember your dreams tonight. I don't think I've gotten any like ideas for art pieces out of it, but there's definitely been some things worth like, all right, this is worth chewing on the rest of the day. So.
Yeah, I do some dream stuff myself quite often, as often as I can. I have some visualization exercises right before and as I'm going to sleep, and they absolutely help. But the problem is that they don't influence the content of the dream. So I end up, like dreaming that I had a cheeseburger or something like that, or like I'm like walking around Sesame Street or something. Like it's nothing cool and like no spiritual breakthroughs,
Yeah, it's kind of been the same for me, where there's definitely been some really like heavy symbolic dreams, but that's like 1 out of like 5. The rest are just kind of like it's like either like it's still kind of normal, but it's a dream, so it's kind of like David Lynch normal, to where it's just like something awkward,
dream logic.
But not like, I'm not like getting like some profound revelation or anything like that most of the time, but there have been some where it's definitely like oh, okay, there's a message, and write that down.
Yeah, it's for when I was starting out in like I guess you would call it initiation through the various initiatic lineages. Excuse me. I would have dreams, but once every 5 nights or so, once every week, once every 2 weeks, where I would really have these very lucid experiences. Actually, one of the things that I was able to do way more often was go lucid in a dream and sort of extract material from my subconscious by asking the characters to tell me about themselves. It was a very interesting process, but now it's like maybe like once every 2 months or something like that. I keep a dream journal next to my bed, and the thing is that I realized, like, in that period of time where I was undergoing these crazy experiences, like I am 100% positive looking back at my notebooks, like I must have come off as completely insane to everybody that crossed my path. So it's probably not a great thing to have them that often all the time,
That's a pretty common thing that I hear about. Like I remember even, I'm a Freemason, and I remember when I was initiated, some of the more esoteric guys were like pay attention to your dreams now. Like even like the night of the initiation, they're like they do the cliche, like, all right, chew on this and then we'll get you later. But one of them was definitely like pay attention to your dreams now, like especially like the next week. Because I mean you're opening something up there.
Yeah.
And
that's cool, man. I didn't know that you were a Mason. I was going to ask you if you were a traveling man. It was on my notepad here. So
2013 I was initiated. So 10 years ago. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I guess you are connected to the initiatic the Western esoteric tradition. Freemasonry is a big part of it, and it's one of those things where I'm sure you've been a Mason longer than I have, but for people who are listening, it's always a touchy subject, Masonry. People either are fascinated by it or they immediately think that you worship the devil and control the world. And but Freemasonry, you can go as deep or as shallow as you want in it, and I think still derive something of equal value, because and that's the interesting thing too for people who are into art and visual art. I mean, that's Masonry. Masonry is symbols.
Yeah, that was a big pull towards it. My first introduction to Masonry, outside of like my grandpa being a Shriner when I was a kid and remembering that, but he never talked about it or anything. Really, it was conspiracy theories in the early 2000s, and like hearing about this secret society that's controlling the world, and they worship the devil or something like that, and being like, who the hell are these guys? And it probably was through reading like Manly Palmer Hall, and I guess before that it was I got into in my early 20s. I was definitely influenced by just like I wanted to do comparative religious studies in school. I was reading a ton of mythology. I got into Carl Jung. Jung opened me up to Gnosticism and then to alchemy. So like I was studying in that realm. And then of course, whenever you're in that, you go through your Manly Hall phase, and he's just like Masonry this, Masonry that, and just like builds them up as like this is like the pinnacle, the backbone of Western esoterica. And here I'm making art that is symbol rich. It's dealing with similar ideas. It's the exact same thing that Masonry is doing, is allegories and symbols. And but it was one of those things where like I waited a long time to actually like petition and reach out. One, because it's like I just wasn't sure if like I was cut for it. Like I was just poor artist straight out of school, juggling jobs. Doesn't have his shit together, and prestigious.
What's really interesting about the language you use right there, not sure if I was cut for it. I mean, Freemasons will know we all come in as a rough ash there, so you get cut later on.
But no, yeah, it was a huge influence. Like, so combining like what I was doing already, and then like having kind of like this formalized system that also like opened all these other doors to just rabbit holes of research. It definitely was a huge blessing for me on just my path. And I definitely was one of those guys that like once I got in it, like he was just in it, like reading every book that I could get my hands on, just going down every rabbit hole. I was fortunate enough to have a handful of guys that I met through the lodge that were also into similar topics. So we'd get together. There's like a tavern that was like down the street from the lodge, and after meetings we would just go there and just drink and talk about Kabbalah or any of these like esoteric rabbit holes. And it was fun, like that's just enriching. I went to this, and then that was just another like university of symbolisms and a huge influence. That was the one I was really kind of aiming to get into. Like I joined Masonry to go into the Scottish Rite, basically.
That's That's awesome. I mean, it's the camaraderie for me is really the very, very attractive thing about masonry. I kind of had the opposite thing where I joined every other well, I didn't join every other esoteric order. I joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and then I did Martinism. I became a Martinist, and then I got into Freemasonry. But again, through Manly Palmer Hall, I really did connect with the egregore, the energy of masonry, that living energy that exists. Whether or not you're initiated, I think you can tap into it. It's just how deep you can actually get. I think you have to join some sort of initiatic lineage, but and I think having done all that other stuff, what he says is true about masonry. It is the pinnacle. It is the backbone, because it's was the arc of transmission. Because you look at the Golden Dawn, you look at Martinism, they all came out of masonry, and the symbols they study are all from masonry, whether it's your appended bodies like York Rite or Scottish Rite. All the symbolism, I would venture to say that like 90% of the symbolism is from some part of masonry in all of these orders. But I came from a different background. I was a musician, and the interesting thing for me is that space that you tap into, it's very, very, I know this is a buzzword right now, but it is very liminal. That when you're trying to, I guess, use your waking mind to explore the subconscious, which is, it's not that door for most people is closed unless they're asleep. And with artists, and I think everybody can be an artist. We're not going to pat ourselves on the back here. It's not good for us, but the truth is, everybody can be an artist. It's just, are you gonna carve out the time to become an artist and work that muscle, which really is learning to tap into the subconscious imagery, in your sphere. But I mean, that is what, being in that state is what drew me, I think, towards things like magic, is being in the artistic mindset. But do you do any other kind of art? Do you do music or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't do music. It's mostly visual art. I forced myself to learn how to do gouache paintings. It was a couple winters ago. I moved out of the city of St. Louis in 2019, and I moved into like this little farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere, super isolated, which was perfect once 2020 hit, because it was just like, I could just go outside and the world was fine for me. But it was also, I had some pretty rickety windows, and the winters would get really, really cold. So instead of like sitting in here, which is basically a living room turned art studio, I just locked myself in my bedroom all winter with a space heater and an easel, and then just started. I was like, all right, I'm going to learn how to gouache paint. I've never used these before, and so yeah, I guess I do some gouache paintings. I do some photo, video, but primarily it's my focus has been the relief woodcut style prints.
Forgive my ignorance. What is a gouache painting?
It's like a mix of acrylic and watercolor. So it's even spelling it, it's like GUACHE or something like that, and that's probably wrong. A bunch of vowels in there. Yeah, it can have that like that thick opacity that that an acrylic does, but if you water it down, it has that real like fluid transparency that watercolors can get. So it's like this balancing game. So which is fun, but like you definitely like screw up a lot in the beginning when you're just trying to learn it. But I was sitting in my bedroom with a blanket wrapped around me, just
yeah, there's no other way, man. I mean, unfortunately, unless you're a prodigy, right? I mean, that's kind of It can be a little unfair. But I tell people all the time I sucked for the first 10 years that I played like the drums, you know. It's played guitar. If you're getting something out of it and you keep going, you'll get there. You know, you just have to be connecting with whatever it is you're doing. But there's this interesting thing that happens where there's this passive phase, at least for me, there's this passive phase where my consciousness is absorbing. It's in a state of absorption. And that's usually when I'm like going and looking at art, or I'm listening to a new record, or doing, you know, just having a nature bath, walking through the woods, or anything, reading a good book. And then that will inevitably trigger this active state, where I have all this creative output. Do you find that there's a similar thing going on with you? And if so, what's your quarry? From where do you source your inspiration?
Man, well, I guess like the visuals, I kind of spoke on that earlier, where, you know, a lot of times the visuals just kind of happen.
Right.
You know, I do spend a lot of time reading. So there is that I'm also like feeding my unconscious too, is just the, you know, just the research and the books that I'm reading and all that. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, yeah, it's just, you know, I could be doing a mundane task, and then just like something just like pops in my head. I've always got like one of these like little moleskin notebooks on me at all times, and just keep it in my back pocket, and a pen. So something comes, I just have to like write it down, doodle it out real quick. And you know, probably a few pieces behind me happened while I'm just like driving my car or something like that. And I'm trying to like draw this like real sloppy sketch and then like write down some words. So,
are you into film? Because I know like not a lot of people know who Alejandro Jodorowsky is. So because that's how I found out about his tarot book. I watched like El Topo and the Holy Mountain. So are you into film? Are you into like surrealism?
I don't want to say yeah, because I have friends that would like say no, you're not, because I don't know half the stuff that they talk about. And I don't watch a lot of film anymore. I don't really watch anything. I did want to go to school for film at one point when I was bouncing around trying to figure things out. You know, I was doing a lot of photography and music. You know, I wasn't making music, but just music itself was extremely just inspirational for me in my early 20s, and just the visual narratives that would come just listening to music. It was like I wanted to make music videos, because that was like still a thing really back in the day, because I could just like put on a song and close my eyes and just like create something with you know, whatever song it was. I remember it was one of the Blonde Redhead albums. That was kind of like the one that really inspired me. Like, you should study film, because I created a music video for every single track on that album. And it's just like, cool, I'm going to go study experimental film. I went up to Chicago to Columbia and did a tour. And basically they told me like, all right, you're going to come here. You're going to get a degree. You're going to be $100,000 in debt. You're going to move to LA. You're going to, if you're lucky, you're going to be holding a boom mic, and you're going to be serving tables. So it's like, well, all right, I probably shouldn't do that. But I still end up going to school for like an art degree, so I'm still like in debt from that. But yeah, no, like, so as for answering your question, Jodorowsky was the reason I got the Marseille deck. Was because of the Holy Mountain. I was introduced to him through El Topo originally. I had a friend suggest that. I think it was like because it was like Marilyn Manson's favorite movie or something like that. Um, and then then I found then it was the Holy Mountain, and then that like just like blew my mind. Like I would watch that like all the time. So it was more of Jodorowsky's style of film and his symbol usage and just what he dealt with. And then the tarot aspect of the Holy Mountain. And then that was enough to be like, okay, I'm going to buy his book. So yeah.
Yeah, I always drew a lot of inspiration from film. And I used to tell people that I kicked myself in the ass for not going to film school, but now I understand it was the better choice. But for me, surrealism in film, it tends to have more of an inspirational quality because everything is symbolic and it's not, okay, this is what the scene is. It's everything's very suggestive, you know. And I was really into Jodorowsky for a little while, and then I got into Kenneth Anger's films, and I'm not a huge fan anymore. Just because that whole scene kind of creeps me out, like that group of people. But I got a very visceral feeling from his movies where like I'd be done with it and I'd have like this knot in the pit of my stomach that would like stay with me for days. And yeah, and actually I would have some weird dreams after watching like that stuff, or like any Jim Jarmusch's movies, you know, the Limits of Control and all that stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of where I was going with that question. I was curious as to whether or not you had been steeped in film, because a lot of, I think, visual and artists that work in sound, we do draw a lot from film, because film has everything, right? It has pictures, it has music, it's the penultimate kind of storytelling medium. Unfortunately, it's just used to peddle bullshit now, but I think it can be, you know, it can be a supreme kind of delivery method.
Yeah. In my 20s, yeah, I was definitely watching more films, and that had the influence on me. But nowadays, no, not really. Like I don't watch a lot of movies. I don't, you know, I don't even have like a subscription to Netflix or anything like that. Like, yeah, and when I'm working on stuff, if I am watching something, you know, it's on like my iPad and I'm carving and I'm not like fully watching it. Like it's just kind of there. Rarely do I like sit down and watch a movie or a show or anything.
Yeah.
The music, or I'll have like a podcast on or something like.
Yeah, I feel like podcasts have definitely taken over that kind of idle space. Not many people have the free time anymore to like just immerse themselves in a movie. I feel like a lot of us are just working all the time or commuting all the time. So yeah, I mean, it's probably for the best. But so you've done masonry, you've done a set of tarot trumps. You've now done this very strange podcast that with me. Are you a practitioner of any kind of magic or any kind of spiritual system?
I would just say no, really, to that. In a sense, like I definitely spent the last 10 years exploring all of those. You know, especially around masonry, because that like just opens the doors, and then it's like, well, what else is there? And then it's like, oh well, yeah, you've got the Golden Dawn, you've got Thelema, you've got, you name it. and yeah, like I've gone down all of those rabbit holes. I mean, I remember I got Rigardi's big black book probably at too young of an age to really like understand what it was. But at the same time, I felt like I had something like really special. Even if you just go on Amazon or Borders at the time or something and pick it up. And then, so yeah, like exploring the Golden Dawn. I definitely went down reading a lot of the just Thelema and Crowley, just out of curiosity. Like I wrote him off for the longest time, and I kind of came back around where it's like, I'm going to give him a shot. I just read them, and then I'm back to the part where I'm like, I've written them off again.
Yeah, I'm really not
a
Crowley fan. I mean, I say it a lot, but the cons by far outweigh the pros with that guy.
Really, like everything he's done, like it's nothing original. It's nothing original at all. Like he just kind of rebranded it. He's a great marketing guy. Like he's got the marketing down.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I was initiated into a Martinist lineage. I'm only at the first degree, which is the associates, I believe that's referred to as. That was probably one of the most amazing initiations I've ever had. I haven't gone up any, and it's mostly because of location, and also like like the last 3 years were not a whole lot of traveling was happening. But no, really, like, and that was always something too. Like I felt like I had to find one of these groups, and none of them were really like filling that hole for me. And when you're in that scene, it's kind of like there's this guilt to where like you have to have one of these banners or you're not doing it right. And it took me longer than what it should have to realize like the art making practice itself is, I mean, that's magic. You are literally partaking in the creative process itself, which is essentially what the universe is. Like there's nothing more of mimicking the creator than creating. And especially whenever what's happening, at least like for me, with and I can't say this for every artist because there's so many different artists, and there's definitely a lot of mundane artists. And I mean mundane as in like worldly. But for me, that works in this realm where I'm utilizing symbols, I'm utilizing ideas, and just the idea that you are interacting with something beyond that is transmitting ideas that reflect a response in the viewer to where you become connected to what that is, whatever that is, if you even know what it is. If that's not magic, then I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is what I've both seen and experienced in my my time in esoteric orders, is that it's a world unto itself. It's a microcosm. I tell people all the time, it's like Harry Potter. There's a world that you don't even know that exists that's out there, and I'm not neck deep in it, but I'm getting there for sure. And the one caveat that I try and tell people is that, like, go through a system, understand it, suspend your disbelief. You have to get good, and this is true in art. You have to get good at dealing with what people who are trying to gaslight you call cognitive dissonance. If you have to suspend both, or sometimes 3, 4 different viewpoints and perspectives in front of you just long enough to have a species of completion, right? Just one arc to be able to understand to some degree what this is. And then do not resist every temptation to impress people, right? Climb that. I like to call it acquiring your magical merit badges. And then the other thing is, use it for yourself. Everybody should be, and this is what happened in the original Golden Dawn. Everybody branched out and did their own thing. They took the system and they brought it into their lives instead of, creating this social group where people get together and talk about the Kabbalah and sometimes smoke weed and, eat sandwiches. It's, that's cool. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But I mean, if you're going to really yield anything from this, I think that you have to have, like you're saying, this realization where it's like, what I'm doing in my life, has to have some kind of autonomy outside of the depth of identification I have now associated myself. I've tied myself to this thing that has very little to do with what I do on a day-to-day basis, in my own experience and my own creative or whatever it is endeavors. So I think that's super important. I think people can benefit from them. I don't think everybody can. A lot of people out there will say, like, just you can do it, just keep going. At a certain point, you have to know that I'm not going to be a magician. I'm not going to do this stuff. It's better for you.
Right. And I mean, maybe too, like just with, especially like the online communities, it's, especially if you want to talk about like the ceremonial scene, but each of these groups, they make it seem to be like, this is the way, this is it, this is legit, and it is for them, that is for them. But like, yeah, it doesn't work like that for everyone. One of my big influences this last year and a half has been Jacob Burma, and he's been a huge inspiration, because he's just a common Protestant labor worker. He was a shoemaker.
He's a shoemaker. Yeah.
And then he has these experiences, and he's just like, he was influenced. You can definitely, like, he read some stuff too. Like there's definitely knowledge of some Hermetic influence and astrology, of course, and alchemy. Like that's in there. It wasn't just him just like having these strict, profound revelations, and he just knew all this stuff. And that might have also like came with time too, but that's really like struck a chord, because that's kind of like my background too. Like I grew up in a Protestant upbringing, and probably one of my gripes with that was, one of the benefits is that it does put highlight on the individual and the individual's capability of having an interaction with the divine. Like it's like it's not like, say, like the Catholic approach or whatnot, but it's there's power in the individual. You just pray, and you're connected. So having that influence as a kid, like this is normal. Like this is, like you don't have to go through this rigmarole, special initiation, and then memorize a bunch of stuff to get to a certain degree before you can have a conversation with something greater than you. It's like, no, you just do it. Like that was just common knowledge as a kid. So definitely blessed with that. But then out I guess the downside of it is that it doesn't have that ritual aspect. It doesn't have that mystical component to it. Like that was missing, and that was definitely something I was looking for whenever I got to adulthood. And like there was something missing, and it was that mystical aspect. Art definitely filled in that hole for me, because that is a mystical act. You are pulling down, and you're receiving, and then not only that, is once you've received, then you're interacting, you're working with these ideas, and you're physically making these ideas, which is, again, like you want to talk about magic, that's what you're doing. It may not be putting on a robe and waving a wand around. It's you're at a desk and you're carving or you're painting, but there's a ritual, there's a trance state that you go into, and it is very much an alchemical process that is happening, that is not only reflective in the piece that you're making, but also the individual self while you're making it.
Sorry, go ahead. There's a lag. I apologize.
Coming across someone like Burma was like it filled in that gap, and especially like him, and then just like the Theosophist, not the Theosophical Society, but the Theosophist, those German Theosophists, and those who had inspired, who are having similar experiences and working in similar ways. That's been a big influence on me the last year and a half, with that. So what were you about to say?
Well, I was just gonna note, and I think I had said it in a previous podcast. I'm kind of at the point where I'm like doing like back to back. So I forget. I tend to repeat myself, but I think that this is appropriate for what we're talking about here. Is a lot of people seem to get hung up and forget that, like, everything that we're working with, whether it's spirit, or whether it's wood carving, or whether it's shoemaking or writing or praying or magic, wand waving, like the starting point, and arguably the only thing that we're really working with in our locus, is our consciousness. And people can achieve that very, very fine-tuned I guess flow state consciousness. They can do it from a craft that they've learned, that they've really honed. They could do it from meditation. They can do it from listening to music, and you can some people cultivate that via ritual. But really, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is getting yourself to that space where you are like pulling things down.
Yeah. And the purpose of ritual is to put you into that state. You're doing these, especially like these rigorous rituals, and you have to, like, why do I have to memorize all this stuff? Why does it have to be precise? And it's the discipline is what you're doing. You're disciplining yourself to be able to go into this state, and that state's going to be to convene with God, your higher self, spirit, whatever. But it's a discipline act that, it puts you into that realm where you're open to it. And for some people, a really structured system is going to work really well. For other people, it's going to be going out in the garden.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, to be honest with you, when I need a break from all the the very, very abstract stuff. That's exactly what I do. But are you working on anything right now? Any new projects or anything that you're about to release or you're in the middle of doing?
Um, I am. I mean, I'm always making new pieces. I do have a show that I'm in. It's going to be in St. Louis. Um, it's a 2-person show. It'll be up next month. Um, it's called Myth and Allegory, and I have to have that stuff done in like a month. So I am kind of like cranking out some new things. I've got plenty of stuff to show, but that's kind of where my focus has been. I've got a couple other like group shows and stuff like that I've got lined up, but yeah, it's just, I mean, there's always new work. That's so like, for example, like I've got 10 blocks that I'm trying to complete now. That's kind of the process that I do is I'll carve a handful of blocks, and my process is once I print them, it's just a black ink on paper, and I come back and I actually like hand paint each individual print. So even though there's like an addition of say like 12 or something like that, each one is still like individually hand painted. So they are an addition of multiples, but they are at the same time also unique in their own sense. And they've also got that intent put into each one of them too. Whereas typical printing, you carve the block, run it through the press, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. This is, after that, I come back and it's back to like putting that focus into them, putting that energy into them. Each one is still getting like that charge. I find that to be something very special in the approach that I do with them is, if we're looking at these things as basically like magical pieces that have got the attention from the creator for X amount of time. Yeah, I've got 12 of them or so, but there's hours and hours on top of that individually as well.
Yeah. What's really interesting to me about that is you're talking about a talisman. You're creating a talisman to a certain degree. And speaking of Regarty's Black Book, first of all, it is very special, and nobody knows what they have in their hands, no matter how old you are when you have it. But there's a section on there on talismanic consecration, and he says that the sufficiently advanced adept should be able to create and charge a talisman by like just making it, like without having to do the whole rigmarole and ritual. And that's the interesting thing for me about, or one of the many interesting things for me about the Golden Dawn, is that I learned how to craft and put my attention consciously into things, because you've got all sorts of stuff to make. You've got talismans, you've got ritual tools, you've got altars, all sorts of stuff that you typically make by hand. And to me, that's what's really cool about what you're talking about. It sounds like you're actually like making this talisman that has the specific energies of your microcosm, and then whatever was pouring through it is in that. That's a very, I think that's, I mean, it's a very special piece, I
mean, even like the way you're describing that there too, it reminds me of talking about like alchemy, like the original forms of alchemy, or at least like the earliest forms of alchemy, like when you're talking about like Zosimos, when he wasn't making necessarily gold, he was just coloring statues is what it was. And what is that called? Whenever is it called the opening of the mouth. Is that what it is? Whenever like it brings the
Yes, yeah. It's like the ancient Egyptian rite, how they would ensoul a statue with a specific energy, or really a god. It was called the opening of the mouth.
yeah, and that's what it is. You know, you're making you know you're making that bridge with the divine, essentially, or as like um, mine's blank, but basically like the synthemata.
Yes.
So it's the synthemata is essentially a magical piece of, we could say, art, whether it be a statue or a visual, and it connects to where when the viewer interacts, when the viewer views this piece, they are, or actually it's their soul is connected to the divine, and this is just the bridge for it. It's like the key. So I mean, that's
some pretty advanced shit you're talking about right now. This is like Neoplatonic Iamblican theurgy that you've just kind of opened the door to. I love it.
Iamblichus, yeah. That's the
so are you still doing art, Prima?
what was that?
Are you still doing like book covers for Tria Prima Press, or was that just the one-off thing for I think would you do Angels and Vermilion?
I did that, and I did Jamie's last book.
That's awesome.
I did that for him. I'm not sure if they've got anything new coming out. I heard Jamie's working on a new book. I don't know if he's releasing it through them or not.
He is, yeah. He's going to be releasing it actually, and so I'll say this out loud. So now I have to finish it. I'm going to be doing a book through them too. So I would totally love if you did the artwork for it. So
yeah. I'm not speaking on behalf of everything, but it feels like I'm doing at least most of the covers.
Awesome, cool. That's awesome, man.
I guess I'll find out. Then not long ago, and it felt like it was about a new book. And sorry, that was my cat sneezing. I don't know if you heard that. Yeah, but I'm taking Jamie's astrology class here in a couple of weeks, so I'm stoked for that. So
me too. Cool. I'll be there with you. So typically I have two stock questions that I ask everybody at the end of the podcast. I'm going to skip the first one because we kind of covered it already, but the second one, name 3 works in any media, whether that's literature or digital media or anything, film, music, that you would recommend to people who have listened to some of the things that we've talked about tonight, right? So a pretty broad section of stuff that you just suggest they check out for, I guess, further investigation or just on recommendation. Put you on the spot.
Yeah, right. William Blake would be a great spot. He was a big influence on me early on. Mostly because like in my early 20s, I was making a lot of really bad poetry, but also like making some illustrations with it. And but also as my printmaking career went on, you know, he was a printmaker as well. So like, but he was also this Christian mystic that had, you know, these amazing visions and was able to like express them both with the written word and his art pieces as well. Say another one.
Yeah,
meditation.
Repeat that. I'm sorry.
Meditations on the Tarot. So the book I was talking about earlier. Just like,
right.
it's not a, it is a tarot book, but it's not, it's not a tarot book. Yeah, it's definitely, well, the subtitle even says something like, it's, like a Christian Hermeticism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably like, if you're asking me about like a system or something that I'm aligned with or use, like, it's not necessarily a system, but that's probably like the closest label, I would say, for where I am and how I approach things. And then let's see, a third one. Oh yeah, let's stick with Holy Mountain. Like,
Yes.
I know we already talked about it, but yeah, it's the same thing. It's rich in allegory. It's rich in symbolism. It's filled with mystery, and you come back to it every time, and you're going to see something. You're going to pull something different from it. So.
Yeah, it's a feast for the eyes too. The colors and the costumes and the set and the lighting. It's just so engaging there. But I think those are three fantastic recommendations. And do you have anything else you want to plug before we wrap it up?
No, not really. No, nothing off the top of my head.
So you're at people can find your stuff at infinityprints.com.
Yeah. There's a hyphen between Infinity and Prince. Instagram is just my name, just Travis Lawrence, all one word. That's where I probably the most active, like posting, share a lot of like in process shots and stuff like that.
That's great. That's great. Awesome, man. Well, Travis Lawrence, thank you so much for sitting down and having this this conversation with me, man. I'm really happy to have gotten to know you through this conversation a little bit better, and I'm really looking forward to staying tuned into everything that you're doing, and hopefully working together and having a conversation like this in the future.
Totally, yeah, and I guess I'll be seeing you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Have a good night.
Pleasure. Thank you.